July 1987. That's when everything changed for a quiet desert town most people have never heard of. But before we get into what happened, I want you to do something for me. I want you to picture it. Picture a small city carved into the Chihuahuan Desert of southeastern New Mexico, where the summer heat doesn't ask permission and the Pecos River just meanders through the basin like it has nowhere to be. That's Carlsbad, New Mexico. In 1987, Carlsbad was a working-class community of roughly 25,000 people, the kind of town built on the land itself, potash mining, oil and gas, and just a short drive away, one of the most breathtaking natural wonders this country has to offer, Carlsbad Caverns National Park. People knew their neighbors. Kids stayed out past sunset without anyone worrying. By every measure, it was the kind of place you'd want to plant roots and raise a family, which is exactly why it hit this community like a freight train, and why, for the next 36 years, the name Donna Sue Hyatt would never stop echoing, not for the people who loved her, and not for the investigators who made her a promise they refused to break. This is her story, and I need you to stay with me, because every detail is going to matter. Donna Sue Black was born on August 28, 1948, right there in Carlsbad. Everyone who knew her will tell you the same thing, and they'll mean it. She had a warmth that pulled people in. Not the kind of thing people say just because someone is gone. The real kind. The specific kind. The kind that fills up a room before a person even says a word. She grew up alongside her parents, Roger Marvin and Sybil Lunsford Black, and her two sisters, Marlene and Sandra. The Black home was loud in the best way, full of laughter, full of faith, full of the quiet, everyday goodness that you never think to hold on to until it's no longer there. Donna was a woman anchored in her faith. She was deeply involved with the First Baptist Church in Carlsbad and gave her time to the Christian Women's Club, where she built real friendships and poured into her community. She went on to study at New Mexico State University, and that tells you something about who she was. This was not a woman who let life just happen to her. She moved through it with intention. She got married. She became a mother to two daughters, Angela Holsey and Michelle Perry. And then, without warning, the life she had built was fractured. Her husband died suddenly, leaving Donna to raise her girls alone. Just like that, everything changed. The life she had built disrupted in the most devastating way. But here is where you need to understand what kind of woman Donna Hyatt was. She didn't fall apart. According to her daughter Michelle, Donna grieved because of course she did, but then she got up. She braced herself. She took on the role of single mother with everything she had. She made sure her daughters never felt alone. She showed up every single day, even when she must have been exhausted and heartbroken. By the summer of 1987, Donna was 38 years old. She was living with her younger daughter Angela at their home on Elm Street in Carlsbad. It was a modest, quiet street in a modest, quiet town. There was no reason for anyone to think that the summer of 1987 would be anything other than ordinary. It would not be ordinary. Let me walk you through the timeline of July 8, 1987. I want you to understand it piece by piece, because the details matter. They always matter. That evening, around 8:30 p.m., Donna and her daughter Angela had an argument. It was about finances, one of those fights that happens in every family. The kind of mundane, frustrating disagreement that nobody could possibly imagine would be the last real conversation between two people. Angela was upset. Donna was upset. And Donna, being Donna, the kind of woman who needed to clear her head, grabbed her purse and stormed out. Angela and her boyfriend left the house too, giving everyone space. Store receipts would later confirm what Angela said, that Donna did in fact go out that night. A receipt found at the scene, time-stamped 9:13 p.m., placed her at a local convenience store. The store clerk would later tell investigators something crucial. Donna didn't come in alone. She came in with a man tall, thin, with brown to blondish hair and light-colored eyes. The clerk described their interaction as seemingly friendly, but also noted that it appeared to be the first time the two of them had met. They weren't old friends. They were strangers, or something very close to it. Angela and her boyfriend returned home around 11:40 p.m. When they walked through the front door, what Angela saw changed her life forever. Her mother, Donna Sue Hyatt, was lying on the living room floor. Angela's boyfriend immediately called 911. When officers arrived, they found Donna dead. The house key was still near her body. She had been attacked the moment she came home. The crime scene told a story. Donna's house key was lying near her body, a detail that spoke volumes to investigators. She hadn't been grabbed from inside the house. She had come home, come through the door, and been attacked almost immediately, right there in her own living room. No forced entry, which meant either she let someone in or she was followed home. Possibly both. A trail of blood led investigators toward the kitchen, where they found a bloody handprint smeared across a light switch. A knife was missing from the utensil drawer. In the backyard, officers found a shoe impression pressed into the dirt and a section of fence that had been pushed down with blood on it. The killer, it appeared, had fled through the back. The autopsy was devastating in its findings. Donna Sue Hyatt had been beaten. She had sustained multiple stab wounds. She had been struck with blunt force trauma to the head and neck. Her hyoid bone, the small horseshoe-shaped bone in the throat, was broken, a classic indicator of strangulation. And she had been sexually assaulted. A rape kit confirmed the presence of semen on her body. Her cause of death was determined to be a combination of these injuries. Someone had been absolutely brutal. Someone had wanted her to suffer. The community of Carlsbad was horrified, and investigators had a lot of evidence, a lot of questions, and no clear suspect. In the immediate aftermath of the murder, detectives from the Carlsbad Police Department worked the case hard. They started, as they always do, with the people closest to the victim. Angela was questioned. She was cooperative and emotionally shattered. Her alibi checked out. Other members of Donna's close circle were also looked at and cleared. Then something interesting emerged. One of Donna's friends told detectives that earlier on July 8th, the very day she was murdered, Donna had met a man named Andrew at a local salon. She had apparently taken a liking to him and, in the open and friendly way that was very much in character for Donna, had given him her phone number and her address. Investigators found Andrew quickly. His alibi held up. He was not their man, but the convenience store clerk's description remained: tall, thin, brown to blondish hair, light eyes. Someone who had been with Donna at 9:13 p.m. that night. Someone who appeared to be a new acquaintance. Multiple witnesses from the neighborhood also reported hearing someone running through a nearby alleyway around 10:30 p.m., consistent with someone fleeing the scene. Investigators compiled these descriptions and worked with a sketch artist. A composite image of the unknown man was released to the public. Tips came in. Leads were followed. And then, one by one, those leads went cold. No arrest was made. Time passed. People moved on, not because they didn't care, but because life keeps moving, whether you want it to or not. The case was classified as a cold case. The physical evidence, including the rape kit and the DNA collected from the scene, was preserved. The file sat. The years accumulated. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, investigators took the DNA from the crime scene and entered the genetic profile into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, a massive national database of DNA profiles from convicted offenders in crime scenes. CODIS is a powerful tool. It has solved thousands of cases. But for Donna Sue Hyatt's case, it came up empty. Whoever left that DNA at the crime scene was not in the database. Or at least, not yet. More years passed. The case went colder still. Her daughters carried this with them every single day. A mother, gone. No justice, no name, no face. Here is where I need to introduce you to someone. Someone who, at the time of Donna's murder, was living in Carlsbad, or at least passing through. His name was Michael Ruff Wigley. And if you've never heard that name before, that's okay. Because for 36 years, neither had the investigators working this case. Michael Ruff Wigley was a former U.S. Army soldier. At some point during his military service, his career came to a violent and shameful end. He received a dishonorable discharge, the most severe form of military separation, typically reserved for serious crimes. Reports indicate that while serving, Wigley's conduct crossed lines that no soldier, no person, should ever cross. But the military chapter of his story was only the beginning of the pattern. In the early 1980s, back in Central Texas, Michael Ruff Wigley was investigated in connection with not one, but 2 separate sexual assault cases. 2 women, 2 crimes, 2 investigations. He was charged and ultimately convicted in one of those incidents and sentenced to prison. He was given a sentence. He served 5 years. Let that land for a moment. He was convicted of rape in the state of Texas, sentenced to 12 years, and was released after serving less than half of that time. He walked out of prison approximately 18 months before the night of July 8, 1987. 18 months. That's all the time that separated his release and the murder of Donna Sue Hyatt. Wigley had family connections to Carlsbad, New Mexico. According to investigators, he was present and staying in the city during the time of Donna's murder. He matched the description: tall, thin, brown to blondish hair, light eyes. He was someone who could plausibly have been at that convenience store. Someone who could have walked home with a woman he had just met. Someone who had already proven in a court of law that he was capable of sexual violence. But in 1987, none of that connected. Nobody put his name and Donna's name in the same sentence. And by the time investigators might have gotten close, Michael Ruff Wigley was gone not just from Carlsbad, but from the living world entirely. In October 1989, just 2 years after Donna Sue Hyatt was murdered, Michael Ruff Wigley died in a traffic accident on a train track. He was buried in Amarillo, Texas. And that should have been the end of it. But science had other plans. To understand how this case was finally solved, you need to understand a few things about how DNA technology has evolved, because what investigators did here is nothing short of extraordinary. For most of the history of forensic science, DNA evidence worked like this. You collected a sample at a crime scene, you ran it through a database like CODIS, and either you got a hit or you didn't. CODIS contains DNA profiles from convicted offenders and from previous crime scenes. If your suspect wasn't in the system, you were stuck. But starting around 2018 and 2019, a revolutionary new technique began to change everything. Forensic genetic genealogy. You may have heard of it. It's the same method used to catch the Golden State Killer. Here's the basic idea. Instead of looking for an exact match in a law enforcement database, investigators take the DNA from a crime scene and upload it to a genealogy database, the kind of database that ordinary people use to find their long-lost cousins or trace their family trees. Services like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. The DNA doesn't need to match the suspect directly. It just needs to match someone related to the suspect. A sibling, a parent, a cousin. A second cousin, twice removed. Once investigators find those family connections, professional genealogists start building family trees backwards and forwards until they can triangulate who the unknown DNA most likely belongs to. It is painstaking work. It is brilliant work. And in the case of Donna Sue Hyatt, it worked. In 2020, investigators from the Carlsbad Police Department's Cold Case Unit began taking a serious second look at the Hyatt murder. Detectives Joey Landgraf and Tim Nice were assigned to the case. They gathered the old evidence, they assessed what they had, and they made a decision that would prove crucial. They sent the crime scene DNA to Othram, forensic-grade genome sequencing. 5 words that would ultimately give Donna Hyatt a name for her killer. Othram is a private forensic genomics laboratory based in The Woodlands, Texas. They specialize in something called forensic-grade genome sequencing, a process that takes degraded, old, or low-quality DNA evidence and extracts far more genetic information from it than traditional methods can. We're not talking about 13 or 20 genetic markers, like CODIS uses. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of data points across the entire genome. From the crime scene evidence collected in 1987, Othram built a comprehensive DNA profile of the unknown male suspect. Think about that DNA that had been sitting in an evidence locker for over 30 years, and scientists were still able to extract enough information to essentially read this man's genetic signature. That profile was then handed to the FBI's forensic genetic genealogy team, who began the methodical, painstaking process of searching genealogy databases for relatives. They started building a family tree. Branch by branch, name by name, generation by generation, and eventually, a name emerged from the branches: Michael Ruff Wigley. Here's the part of the story that would sound impossible if you didn't know it was real. When detectives Landgraf and Nice followed the genealogy leads to Michael Ruff Wigley and began looking into his background, everything started to align. The timeline, the location, the physical description, the criminal history. 2 sexual assault investigations in Central Texas in the early 1980s, a rape conviction, a prison sentence. The fact that he had family in Carlsbad, the fact that witnesses and family members, when interviewed by the detectives, were able to confirm that Wigley had been present in Carlsbad at the exact time of Donna's murder. The pieces fit, but fitting together isn't the same as proof. And Wigley, the man they believed had raped and murdered Donna Sue Hyatt, had been dead since 1989. He couldn't be arrested. He couldn't stand trial. His DNA wasn't in any database. But his remains were in the ground in Amarillo, Texas. Detectives Landgraf and Nice obtained a search warrant specifically a warrant for the exhumation of Michael Ruff Wigley's body and the collection of his DNA. They coordinated with law enforcement in Amarillo. They traveled to Texas, and they dug him up. I want you to sit with the determination that represents these detectives working an old cold case, traveling to another state, obtaining legal authority to exhume a dead man's remains, all in service of giving justice to a woman who had been waiting for it for over 3 decades. The DNA sample collected from Wigley's remains was sent back to Othram. There, scientists used a proprietary method called kin-SNP, testing a highly precise comparison technique that can definitively match an individual's DNA to a profile built from a crime scene sample. This wasn't a partial match or a probabilistic match. According to investigators and the official press release from the city of Carlsbad, the result was a positive and definitive identification. Michael Ruff Wigley's DNA matched the DNA found on Donna Sue Hyatt's body in 1987. He did it. After 36 years of silence, science had spoken his name. On the 11th of April 2023, the Carlsbad Police Department held a press conference and made an announcement that had been 36 years in the making. Michael Ruff Wigley, former Army soldier, convicted rapist, Carlsbad visitor, in the summer of 1987 had been identified as the suspect responsible for the rape and murder of Donna Sue Hyatt. Mayor Dale Janway of Carlsbad released an official statement. He thanked Detective Joey Landgraf and Detective Tim Nice by name for their dedication and persistence. He acknowledged the work of Othram and the FBI's forensic genetic genealogy team, and he addressed the family and community in the way that only this kind of resolution can allow. It is our sincere hope, Mayor Janway said, that the recent efforts and the efforts of those involved in 1987 can bring some small form of peace and closure to the family of Donna Sue Hyatt and the community of Carlsbad. Some small form of peace. That phrase hit me when I first read it, because it is so honest about what justice can and cannot do. It cannot undo what happened on Elm Street on July 8, 1987. It cannot give Angela back the mother she walked in to find dead on the living room floor. It cannot give Michelle back the years of wondering. It cannot restore what was taken. But it can give a name. It can say, "We know who did this. We found him. He did not escape into the anonymous void of history. He has been identified, and the world knows what he was." Michael Ruff Wigley died in 1989. He never stood in a courtroom for Donna's murder. He never had to face her daughters. He never had to look at a jury. In some ways that will never feel like enough. But in another sense, consider this. For 36 years, his name was unknown. He was just a ghost. A shadow that had drifted through Carlsbad, committed an act of unimaginable violence, and then disappeared, first from the city, then from the earth itself. He thought he had gotten away with it. He died probably believing that. He was wrong. He died in 1989 thinking he had gotten away with it. He was wrong. Science waited patiently to prove him wrong. I want to take a moment here because I think it's important to talk about what this case represents in the larger world of forensic science and criminal justice. Because the Donna Sue Hyatt case is not just a true crime story. It is a landmark example of what modern investigative technology can accomplish. Let's start with Othram. Founded in 2018, Othram was built specifically to address the limitations of traditional forensic DNA testing when it comes to cold cases. Traditional CODIS testing uses what are called short tandem repeats, specific sequences of DNA that can generate a genetic profile with 13 to 20 markers. It's powerful for direct matching. But if the person you're looking for isn't in the system, those 13 to 20 markers can't help you build a family tree. Othram's forensic-grade genome sequencing looks at hundreds of thousands of single nucleotide polymorphisms, tiny variations, across the entire genome. The result is a DNA profile rich enough to find distant relatives in genealogy databases. A second cousin who uploaded their DNA to GEDmatch to find their ancestry has no idea they might one day help solve a murder. But they might. Then there's the kin-SNP testing used at the confirmation stage of this case. Once investigators had identified Wigley as a suspect and obtained his DNA through exhumation, kin-SNP allowed Othram to make a direct, definitive comparison between the crime scene profile and Wigley's own DNA. No ambiguity. No room for error. The FBI's forensic genetic genealogy team, a specialized unit that works in partnership with private labs like Othram, provided the investigative genealogy work that turned a DNA profile into a human name. This is highly skilled work that combines DNA science with traditional genealogical research. building family trees, tracking down records, interviewing relatives. It's detective work in the truest sense, just conducted through a different lens. What this case proves, and what investigators and scientists working in this field will tell you, is that the cold case backlog in America is not hopeless. There are thousands of unsolved murders out there, cases from the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, where DNA was collected, but the technology didn't exist to make it speak. That's changing. Rapidly. Donna Sue Hyatt's case is proof of that. 36 years of silence, broken by a swab taken from decades-old evidence and the extraordinary capabilities of modern science. So here we are, at the end of a story that took 36 years to complete, if we can even call it complete. Michael Ruff Wigley is dead. He cannot be prosecuted. There will be no trial, no verdict, no sentencing. Donna's daughters, Angela and Michelle, will never see a man in handcuffs for what was done to their mother. That's a specific, sharp kind of grief that never fully resolves. The criminal justice system has a formal endpoint, a verdict, and they will never get that. Not for this. But they have something else now. They have a name, they have a face. They have a history that explains, at least in part, how Donna Sue Hyatt came to be standing in a convenience store with a stranger at 9:13 p.m. on July 8, 1987. All man who had already hurt women before. A man who should have been in prison, or at the very least under heavy supervision, but who had been released early and drifted undetected into their lives. They have the knowledge that the investigators who took on this case in 2020, Detectives Landgraf and Nice, cared enough to start over, to look at old evidence with new eyes, to believe that the science had caught up to the crime, to travel to another state and legally exhume a dead man's body in pursuit of the truth. That kind of dedication is not universal. It matters that those two detectives did what they did. They have the knowledge that Donna was not forgotten, that her name was not allowed to simply fade into the anonymous statistics of unsolved crimes. That someone, decades later, said, "No, this matters. She matters." Let's go find out what happened. She was 38 years old. She was a mother. She was a woman of faith and warmth and love. She deserved better. She deserved justice. And 36 years later, she got the closest thing to it that the world could offer. I want to close by saying something directly. If you have a loved one whose case is unsolved, please know that the technology that solved Donna Sue Hyatt's murder is available and being used actively across the country. Othram's DNA Solves database exists specifically so that ordinary people can donate their DNA to help give law enforcement more data points to work with. The FBI's Forensic Genetic Genealogy program is operating. Cold cases are being solved. The world that Donna Sue Hyatt lived in, a world where a rapist could serve 5 years of a 12-year sentence and walk out into the desert Southwest, unmonitored, that world still exists in many ways. And we have to keep talking about that. We have to keep demanding better. But in the specific, narrow, extraordinary story of what happened on Elm Street in Carlsbad, New Mexico on July 8, 1987, the story of a good woman, a violent man, and the decades-long search for the truth, we can at least say this. They found him. It took 36 years. It took genome sequencing, FBI genealogists, an exhumation warrant, and 2 determined detectives. But they found him. Donna Sue Hyatt, born August 28, 1948, in Carlsbad, New Mexico, murdered July 8, 1987, in her own home on Elm Street. Her killer identified on the 11th of April 2023. She was a daughter, a sister, a woman of faith, a single mother who showed up for her kids every single day. She was someone who, on the last night of her life, went out to clear her head after an argument. She was not forgotten. She was not just a cold case file. She was Donna Sue Hyatt. And now the world knows her name, and the name of the man who took her from it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and share. This will really encourage us to do more. Stay safe.